Started. So again, thank you all so much for being here with us today. We're really excited to be able to give you a little bit of background, a little bit of insight into what the work looks like ahead and sort of what the national landscape is that we're working within. I probably don't need to say this to you, but this is unlike any election that any of us have ever worked. And so we're getting our feet, we're finding our bearings. And as we were talking about earlier today, we're all, I think, about zoomed out. So I'm so grateful to you for being on another Zoom call today. I really appreciate the sacrifice. I know exactly what sacrifice that was. And so I thank you all so much for being here. So I'm going to get started with a couple of things that have actually transpired pretty recently. So on the next slide, the first is that we got a pretty landmark Supreme Court ruling this summer, and that was the Bostock versus Clayton County decision. It came down from the Supreme Court, and what it basically did was affirmed that discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity are forms of sex discrimination and are prohibited under Title VII. And so what that means is that for federal employment law, we are protected as a community, which is great. And it was, I think for some of us, pretty shocking. Neil Gorsuch wrote the opinion, and I would have bet good money against that. And so it was a really nice, beautiful day for all of us, and it was a confusing day for a lot of folks about exactly what the decision meant and what the repercussions of the decisions were. And so we do still have almost 30 states where we don't have protections for LGBTQ folks in a number of different areas, and this ruling protected us federally from employment discrimination. There have been some cases that have already happened since, we're about to talk about another, that have started to expand the protections and to really use this precedent that SOGI protections fall under sex discrimination protections to apply it to other areas of law. But right now, in most states, we still don't have explicit protections. And that's important for a few reasons. One is just that there are many, many areas of protections that we need in non-discrimination. The second is that, unfortunately, most state laws provide better opportunities for filing and for getting reimbursed for discrimination. And so federal law, although it's important and it was a really big day, there's still a lot of work to be done. And one of the big things that still needs to be done then is to pass the Equality Act. On the next slide, you can see all of the areas of law that the Equality Act will help to protect us in. Like I said, that Bostock decision gave us employment protections at the federal level. The Equality Act actually addresses 7 different areas of discrimination. Most of these you are protected in the state of Illinois, and most other states are not. And so those areas of protection are employment, credit, housing, education, public accommodations, federal funding, and jury selection. And some of those stand out as possibly areas of discrimination you might not have thought about, but these are all areas that it's valid, it's of vital importance that we have these protections. And unfortunately, Bostock didn't take us all the way there. It's a good start, and it's starting to move precedent forward. In that vein, on the next slide, we've just experienced another landmark ruling, which was the filing of a preliminary injunction earlier this week against the Trump administration's attempts to roll back the Affordable Care Act non-discrimination protections for trans folks. This happened literally 3 days before the Bostock decision. Health and Human Services finalized the new rules, which took back a lot of the Obama era protections, and those would have taken effect this Tuesday. Instead, they didn't. This injunction stopped them. And when the judge ruled, he said, when the Supreme Court announces a major decision, it seems a sensible thing to pause and reflect on the decision's impact. Since HHS has been unwilling to take that path voluntarily, the court now imposes it. And I just love that. I don't know, there's something sassy and brilliant in that, but I really appreciate it. And it also shows us that I think we're on the forefront of more protections for the LGBTQ community that could come as a result of Bostock. However, we're not there yet. And so we're continuing to work hard for the Equality Act, and a lot of what we're going to talk about today is changing the congressional landscape so that we can push the Equality Act forward. This year, the Equality Act got the first ever vote in the House. It was voted out of the House. However, we couldn't even get it to a vote in the Senate because Senate leadership decides the bills that are voted on. And so until we can change the Senate leadership, we can't push the Equality Act through any further in Congress. And so that's our one of our main priorities as we move forward. So even though we've had a couple of wins this summer and in one of the weirdest years of all time, we still know that the attacks aren't going to stop. On the next slide, the Trump administration just doesn't stop. It just never stops. And we actually have a short video for you that our brilliant video team put together that will show you some of the things that the Trump administration has done. Not all, obviously, but some of the things that the Trump administration has done that have affected the queer community.
The choice in this election will not just be a choice between two candidates. It'll be a choice between two futures. A future of more freedom.
License to discriminate against LGBTQ people.
4 more years means more support for our troops.
Banning most transgender troops from serving in the military.
4 more years means more judges.
The search process was to find justices who would not support gay rights.
4 more years means more jobs.
Arguing that civil rights laws do not protect LGBT employees against workplace discrimination.
4 more years means
No longer investigate civil rights complaints from transgender students.
and the CDC for using words like transgender.
Trump administration's so-called conscience rule would deny basic and emergency healthcare to LGBTQ people.
Shooting down sexual orientation and gender identity on the 2020 census.
America needs 4 more years of President Donald Trump.
A large portion of LGBTQIA Americans are being infected with coronavirus.
Thanks, Michael. So again, a pretty short video, but just a small snippet of some of the things that the Trump administration has done. One thing that is great about our position in this election is just that we know that when voters find out about some of these things that they're not aware of, that it is a major mover for folks in their decision about who to vote for in November. But we also know that not that many people even know that all of those things happened. Which seems outlandish for folks who are in the queer community and living it every day. But a big part of HRC's work is going to be to connect what has happened to what could happen to what needs to happen in November. And so our major message right now is just that there is absolutely no room for complacency. We've seen elections swing wildly before. And as someone who's had to do a lot of elections math and turnout math and create a lot of electoral plans, I can tell you that a lot of it is resting on some strategic assumptions, and there are no good strategic assumptions to be made about this election. There has just never been an election like this one. So to say that a lot can change over, it's not 116 days anymore. Don't wait to vote for 116 days. It's more like 75 at this point. It's a lot really can happen, and a lot will happen. This election, again, is unlike any other. We're going to see all sorts of attempts to use the changing situation to lean into voter suppression, to scare people away from the polls, to scare people away from mail-in balloting. And we've already seen in some of the primary elections that have happened that the polling locations that close are the ones that are in the places where folks are already the most disenfranchised. And so it is so important, so important that we not be complacent and that we work as hard as we possibly can, no matter what the polling says, no matter what the math says. I am here to tell you that it is a snapshot. It is not flawless, and in this election, almost nothing is predictable. And even if we were in the position that some of the polling has shown us to be, we have to win this election by a landslide so that there can be no question about the legitimacy of the solution that comes from it, and making sure that there can be no claims about tampering or stealing this election. And we need to win as many down ballot races as possible. As we'll talk about, there are a number of different areas that HRC is focused, but it's not all about the presidency. On the next slide, you can see some of that polling that I just told you to ignore, which I can understand the irony of. This shows where Biden and Trump are in a number of places. You can see the national numbers, but you can also see that in the battlegrounds, it is significantly closer and within the margin of error. And so, as I said, we still do have lots and lots of work to be done. On the next slide is a quote from a Biden campaign pollster about HRC's place in this election. And like I said, support for us has grown so steadily, and the folks who support it are the exact folks who we need to be victorious in November. And so we really are strategically positioned with our brand and with the work that we've done to be significantly helpful in this election. On the next slide, you can also see, so at HRC, we have a model for modeling who is most likely to be supportive of the LGBTQ community, and we call those folks equality voters, anyone with a support score of 70% or above. And you can see that even more than other voters, our pro-equality voters are going to be turnout targets. They are people who could be complacent, who could be the people that we are nervous about not turning out. In just Arizona, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, there are 2.5 million equality voters who are at risk of not voting. Half of those folks are folks of color. Half of those folks are under 35. More than half of those folks are women. And so again, you know, these are the folks that we try to talk to every election, and these are the same folks who support LGBTQ people at higher numbers.